The U.S. Department of Energy is cleaning up the Oak Ridge Reservation of residual hazardous and radioactive contamination left over as a result of decades of nuclear energy research. Much of that work has been influenced by the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board, a citizens panel that provides independent advice and recommendations on DOE's cleanup operations. You're welcome to attend the meetings and be part of this important work. For more information, call us or visit our website.
All right, so we'll get started for everyone. I'd like to welcome, especially the new members tonight. Mr. Mullis will do the introductions here in just a moment. So let's go ahead and start off with our roster for any kind of comments. Let's start off with Ms. Doyle. Like go first.
I don't have any comments.
Mr. Petrie. Anyone from EPA online?
Yes, this is Latanya Spencer on community involvement for Environmental Protection Agency Region 4 Superfund.
Thank you for attending. Mr. Kristoff, PA.
I have no comments. Glad to be here, in person. Welcome everyone. Thank you for contributing your time to this, very important topic.
Thank you, Kristoff. Mr. Mullis, you have the floor.
I appreciate that. Thanks.
Welcome
Good to be back. It's been an interesting tour through headquarters. I have a much broader perspective. At least that's what I'm supposed to say. Happy 2023. It's been a while. I recognize some folks. There's some new folks here. Certainly happy to see Harold here. I've had a long professional relationship with Ian, of course, Bonnie, I've done over the years. So it's good to be back. Certainly appreciate folks volunteering their time. This is an important part of how we advance the cleanup mission here. And so certainly thank everybody for your time that's here. For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Jay Mullis. I've worked for DOE in Oak Ridge since the mid-90s. Was the deputy manager for several years, manager for several years, and got an opportunity to go for a 90-day detail to headquarters that started in October 31st of 21, Halloween, auspicious time for it. It just came back last week. So beware if they tell you, they just need just come up here for 90 days and help us out. One of the folks that was working, one of the deputy assistant secretaries at headquarters that was working for me a few weeks ago, you may have seen the announcement. She's the acting deputy manager. Well, she said, I'm just going out for 120 days. And I told her, beware. Similar to what they told me. But no, it's good to be back. Most of my career with DOD and here have been very field orientated. And so it's nice to be back. We can actually see progress. Interestingly enough, the job they put me in up there had the regulatory affairs, public engagement in it. So I worked a lot with other SSABs, CABs, HABs, different names for them. But so that was interesting to see how they function in other sites. And it's good to know we have a very functional SSAB here. We'll set on that. So I did want to introduce the new members here, and I'm probably going to not pronounce this name right, but I'm going to tell you that my wife is Sicilian from New Jersey, so she'll be upset with me, but I'm going to try. Attilio Anzulati. Is that correct or close? Yeah, close enough. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Is a senior scientist with PetNet Solutions. He is a member of the American Chemical Society and the Oak Ridge Environmental Quality Board and is a resident of Oak Ridge. Chris Bartholomew is also here. Chris. Perfect. Thank you. Is the owner of Turnkey Plumbing and Construction, and his licensures include general contractor plumbing and mechanical and subsurface sewage installation. He is a resident of Lenore City. My grandfather was a master plumber, owned a mechanical contracting company. Before I went to school, I was a journeyman plumber that worked for him. So there you go. We can talk later. Have some work I need done. Mary Butler. Here. She's retired in 2017 as a staff pharmacist with Aurora Pharmacy and is interested in civic and educational issues. He lives in Rockwood. Harold. Of course, I think most folks probably know Harold. Harold Connor is a senior engineering advisor of strategy Has previously served as K-25 plant manager and worked at many DOE sites across the complex and lives in Knoxville. And that's probably an understatement of your career. So,
Yes.
Paul Dill. Paul, retired in 2018 as a project manager with Project Enhancement Corporation, supporting the NNSA's Office of Emergency Operations, and lives in Oliver Springs. Michael Mark here is a former first responder, hazmat professional, and holds many related certifications. He's interested in environmental and economic development issues and lives in Harriman. Christine Michaels. Christine. As a president of the Oak Ridge Chamber of Commerce and is interested in economic development and business issues and lives in Oak Ridge. So first, thank you very much for agreeing to spend your volunteer time here in the evenings. We certainly appreciate it. So thank you. Talked a little bit about my assignment at headquarters. They may prepare the notes and you probably haven't figured out yet. They don't usually follow the notes very well, but it's okay because Mike Kentop, the public affairs guy / executive officer who looks after me, isn't here this evening. So it's all. So I did want to give you a few quick updates about what's been progressing. Late last year, as you guys are probably aware, UCOR took over responsibility of operations at the Transuranic Waste Processing Facility. That's kind of on the back end of Oak Ridge National Laboratory. Prior to that, Northwind had operated that for us. There's been a series of contractors before that. That's where all our transuranic waste that comes mostly from the lab, from prior operations a little bit, still comes from us from Hyper. It's generated by science, but that's where it all gets repackaged, processed, and sent out the whip. If it's contact handled, if it's remote handled, which means you can't get close to it without shielding, we're still storing that, waiting for whip to open up for remote handled waste. UCOR, we moved it under their contract with the new contract that was awarded last year. It's been a smooth transition, and we look forward to that being a bit smoother operation now because used to UCOR had the waste, previous UCOR. You know, it's been interesting to hear the same people talk about the previous contractor that they were. That's kind of, yeah. But used to UCOR had the waste, would have to bring it over. TWPC would process it. If it wasn't stored at TWPC or shipped off, it would come back to UCOR for storage until it could go back over. So that always was a bit of a interface issue for us because of two separate sites. We had to treat all this two separate sites. So hopefully that'll be much more smooth. They're also continuing to emphasize public outreach and education. In December, we hosted an event to share the latest details about the new landfill, EMDF, which we recently got the ROD approved on or moving on the pre-construction work out there and some of the pre-work that we need to do to prove it's a good site. We have posters and project managers available to answer questions about our plans for the early site preparations and our planning another event this summer as the activities start up in August there. We're also planning a public event and comment period this spring that focuses on our approach for groundwater remediation at East Tennessee Technology Park. And we'll share more details with you when we have a firm date. Obviously, that's kind of the last thing for us to be able to get off that site, us being EM to be able to get off that site. And so we're really interested in working through what we're going to need to do for the remediation of groundwater. By our next meeting, we should have some information about who will start the K-25 viewing platform at East Tennessee Technology Park. That project is moving along. We know there's a lot of interest in the community. Certainly, I hope a lot of you were able a few years ago to attend the event for the History Center. And if you haven't been, but you do get a chance, it's opened back up after the pandemic. Please do go through it. It's a very interesting, if you have any interest in the history of the old Oak Ridge GDP, gas distribution plant, K-25 site, ETTP, whatever the name is, please go look. It's a fascinating and interesting place to go. And if you actually work out there, like Harold and Bonnie and myself at one time, there is an ability for you to leave a memory, oral history, record your oral history out there as well. So pretty cool. We've had a lot of folks do that. So that project's moving along. We know there's a lot of interest in the community. The board has been involved heavily with historic preservation efforts over the years, and we're looking forward to having a big groundbreaking again this summer. Lastly, I'd like to highlight our monthly news show, Energy Cast. It comes out on local community television channels, and episodes are also available on YouTube. It's a pleasure, of course. I just got interviewed, so of course it's an exciting episode that'll be coming out, so please don't miss the interview again. I believe that link is passed to you every month. It's a great way to get the latest updates on a lot of various topics. It's also been well received at headquarters as well. Thanks again for coming tonight. Look forward to working with all of you in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Sure.
My presentation will be concerning the waste disposal capacity. Mr. Bates will be our presenter. Ms. Bowman will tell us a little bit about Mr. Bates' file.
So Dennis is the senior project manager for the proposed new environmental management disposal facility, the MDF. Landfill and existing landfills for the Oak Ridge Environmental Management Office. He previously served as a project manager for the groundwater program. He's been with DOE since 2015. Prior to his time with DOE, was with the environmental restoration manager at the Holston Army Ammunition Plant in Kingsport, Tennessee for 3 years. Before that, he worked more than 10 years managing environmental cleanup and engineering geology projects for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. He also worked in private industry, working circular cleanup projects at Army sites. Dennis has a Bachelor of Science degree in geology from the University of Tennessee, Go Vols, in Knoxville. He's also served in the U.S. Air Force for 4 years. The floor is yours, Mr. Dennis.
Very much. I guess I'm standing between you on the basketball game. So let's let you all know here on the schedule here, it shows that I'm the Deputy Federal Project Director. And again, that's really a technical word that DOE uses for project manager. We have a certified program to get certified for project managers. So that's really what that stands for. Brian Henry, though, is the actual Federal Project Director and assistant under him. All right, so at the ridge here, ORM has several landfills that we use to dispose of waste and ensure that we have enough space. And 3 other locations are landfills 4, 5, and 7. And those are overseen by the Tennessee Department of Solid Waste. And then we also have the Environmental Management Waste Management Facility, or also known as MWOF. That's a CERCLA landfill that's oversaw by TDEC and also EPA, in particular Region 4. And then the new landfill that we've been talking about for several years for building is known as the Environmental Management Disposal Facility, or short for EMDF. And there's an item called the waste acceptance criteria that determines which waste can go in each landfill. And I'll go into these various landfills a little bit more on future slides. Okay, so to decide where we put the waste at, we kind of have a hierarchy of where we prefer to go with waste. And the first one is on the top on the left here. We prefer, of course, not to put any item in a landfill. If we have to, we prefer to find a way to reuse it if it's at all possible. And the items that we currently often get recycled or reused or clean concrete, we'll crush that up and use it for roadways at the landfill so that we don't have to use up space. Another good example of items that we often reuse is some of our heavy equipment. The tracks or the wheels are on the equipment that we can't clean. We'll take those wheels and tracks off and put new ones on the vehicles and use them elsewhere, and then only the wheels or the tracks then has to be disposed of. In a landfill, another good example is copper wires or any type of wiring. That's items that are good for reuse, and we're often able to recycle, not have to use up in the landfill. The next option is we prefer to use our permitted landfills, land 4, 5, and 7. We have more space at those. They're a little bit easier on the permit and to get approval to build additional spaces. But for those 3, there's landfill 4. That's a fairly small landfill. It's a little bit less than 40,000 cubic yards, but that's used for classified material that would otherwise could go to landfill 5 or 7. But again, it's only about 40,000 cubic yards. It's currently about halfway full. The next one is landfill 5. It's for sanitary material. It also takes some items like cafeteria items over in L. And then landfill 7 is for construction debris. That's from the site. Now landfill 5, back up to it, it's about permitted, it's about 2.3 million cubic yards. We've currently built out 1.3 million of those current yards. There's about a little over 100,000 cubic yards that's still available in that. And this summer, I'll talk about a few more slides. We're going to be adding on 460,000 cubic yards to that landfill later on this year. Landfill 7 is about 2 million cubic yards. We've built out a little over 1 million of that cubic yards so far. And we still have 400,000 before we have to expand it any larger. So we still have several years available on that particular landfill. Then the next item is circle landfills, M-Wolf. That can take low-level radiological or can have contaminated soil. Its capacity is 2.3 million cubic yards. It's already at 83% full. That's why over the past several years we've been talking about needing to get the approval for EMDF so that we'll continue to have space to put our waste to continue to make good progress on the cleanup here at the site. And then if any of the items above that we can't dispose of any waste there, we have to ship it off site. That's mainly the radiological items, and that mainly goes out west for that. It's the last choice that we go to because it's usually about double the cost to dispose of waste when we go out west. Okay, so talking about the waste that stays on site, the graph on the left there, that shows that that's roughly about 95% of the waste that we stays on the site. That's mainly the concrete, steel, contaminated soil. That's mainly what stays on site. The part going off site, again, as I mentioned, is mainly the items that has a little bit higher radiological activity. And as you can see there, there's the majority of that goes off site. It's only a small amount going in our low level. So I think, several new members here, but I think everybody probably knows the reservation fairly well. But on this figure here, there's a dotted line. I think it's kind of showing up purple there. That's the reservation. It's roughly about 33,000 acres. And there's 3 main sites operated within the facility. The one over to the west, ETTP, or also known as the K25 Heritage Center, has been operated by ORM for several years. That's where the main part of our cleanup was up until 2020. At that time, we completed the demolition of all the buildings out there, and our crews have moved over to Y12 and over in L for building demolition. Although we still have crews at ETTP that's doing the soil cleanup and the groundwater at that location. Down near the southern part is OR and L. Again, that's operated by Office of Science. And then on the upper right corner is Y12, operated by NNSA. It's kind of the blue box there that shows the 3 landfills, the landfills 4, 5, and 7 I talked about. That's just to the southeast of Y12. Down the valley, which is Bear Creek Valley, is M-Wolf, and then about 1.5 miles on down the valley is the planned location for EMDF. This figure doesn't show it, but we have some roads that we refer to them as haul roads. We use those roads to haul all of our waste to the landfill. That allows us to keep it off of the public highways for safety concerns and a direct shot to the landfills. And this is an aerial view of these landfills off to the south there. Y12 is 4, 5, and 7. Those are the 3 active permitted landfills I talked about. This figure also shows some of our closed landfills with the numbers 1, 2, and 6 on them. And again, there's M-Wolf on down the valley and EMDF. One thing to show here, it's a little hard to see in the corner here. Corner doesn't work on the TV, but Mark's going to point it out here to y'all. So there's a ridge between Y12 and permitted landfills, it's known as Chestnut Ridge there, a little bit
So,
to the south there, it's Chestnut Ridge, there's a ridge there, and so Y12 is down in the valley, then to the north, Elm Wolf and EMDF, there's another ridge called Pine Ridge. And that provides a visual barrier that protects the public on the other side there. It's not a nuisance seeing the landfills operate. And then also, can't really tell it from here, but groundwater in this area flows to the west from about the middle part of Y12. So groundwater all flows away from the public there. And Mark, if you'll point out the haul roads too that I mentioned a while ago there. So the haul road comes right up through that area, goes up to Elm Wolf. And so that's that particular road. I wanted to point that out. So part of the early construction that we'll be doing for EMDF is actually we have to move that haul road. As you can see, it goes right through the center of EMDF. And that also requires that we move Bear Creek Road, which is a paved road a little bit to the south. So as we start talking and giving updates on that construction, that'll be some of that first work that we expect to start later on this summer. And you can see that, sorry. We give up the ridge. This is City Oak Ridge here. And from EMDF, if you go straight north, it's about a mile up to the residents up there. So I think it's about 4,700 get up there, Mark. So give you an idea of this. Since there's no graph on there, but that's just under a mile's distance. Okay, so I talked about ETPP. This is a figure photograph that I really enjoy here. The one on the top left, of course, is ETPP before we started to clean up. And the bottom right now is showing what the site looks out there. And as you know, flat land is a premium in East Tennessee. So that this work has provided quite a good area for new industries that can start up. And there was a few buildings that got left that didn't have to be destroyed. And that's most of those have been turned over now at this time. Again, we have crews out there that are doing some soil cleanup out there. And eventually the groundwater. So this is a close-up photo of Elm Wolf. This is where the majority of the waste from ETTP has gotten disposed of. Again, it's about 83% filled. There's 6 cells that go from the right to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Cells 1 through 5 are about 95% full. Cell 6 is just over 20% full at this time. There's also, Mark, I'll get you point out some more. There's some structures there. There's some contact water ponds to your right there. There's 4 of those. And off to the left, there's also 4 contact water tanks. Between those 8 structures, we can collect about 3 million gallons of contact water. What contact water is? It's water that comes in contact with the waste or the soil that's up there and it flows off, and then we collect it in those tanks and ponds until they're full, and then we sample them. And if they come back and meet the discharge, then they go down to the sediment basin that's down here and then off over into the tributary. We also have 8 leachate tanks up there. And those are the water that comes in contact with the waste, settles down through the bottom into the leachate collection system. We pump it there. And from there, we have tankers that load up from those tanks and take it over to ORNL, where there's a wastewater treatment system, and that water is treated there before it's discharged. Up on the landfill, you can see there's a dark area that's a enhanced operational cover is what's labeled there, but it's about 80 millimeter thick, or 80 mil thick liner. And what that allows us to do is that when it rains, the water comes in contact with that, it flows out into the ecosystem. It doesn't have to be collected because it's not been in contact with the waste, and it allows us to allow water to stay at the area and then also not have to manage that. We currently have about 13.5 acres that has that enhanced cover. And the entire area there that's inside the green dotted line is about 28 acres. So the lake part where the landfill is actually 28 acres, not counting the support area. So, and then the Hall Road, if you'll point that out, Mark, I appreciate it. Yeah, so that's where it comes up there. It circles up as he's going. That's the route that our trucks takes to go up to the landfill. And there's also some support trailers that is also shown on that figure. Okay, so up to these slides, these are the work that we've done in the past and where most of our waste that went to from this point forward. I'm going to talk about kind of the cleanup that we have going forward and what we have to do to make sure that we have space to dispose of it. These are two pictures here showing one on the left is Y12 and on the right is ORNL. And the ones that are highlighted, here's red on the screen right there, are the buildings that are planned to be demolished in the future. Scales are a little bit off. Those Y12 is actually about 2/3 of our volume of waste we expect to come from the Y12 area. There's fewer buildings, but those are actually much larger buildings at Y12 than ORNL. About 1/3 of the waste then will come from ORNL. There's a lot more buildings out there, but those buildings are actually a little bit smaller, spice less waste. And one thing to point out again, I talked about the valleys here, but as you can see from here, everything's kind of closed in. And there's not a lot of space. So that's one important thing for us to have the good disposal capacity if we can get these buildings down to allow Y12 and ORNL to have additional space in the future to build structures as they need. Without the on-site waste disposal, it would take longer for disposal since it'd be a lot more cost involved with shipping everything out west. So this figure here shows our budget. So essentially, our cleanup pace is controlled by how much money we get, which in turn also controls then how much waste we have to dispose. We've been very fortunate here, especially over the past 6 years, to have a much higher budget. It went up about 200 million about 6 years ago. So we've been able to complete quite a bit of work. I would want to point out one thing. If you looked at it, it may look like our budget has went down a little bit since 2020, but that's really a reflection of us completing the work at ETTP. Blue part, the bottom part of the graph is the funds that we use to do cleanup at Y12 and at ORNL. So as you can see, as we've shifted over there, that we've continued to get more funding to work there. And the only reason the top part appears to be dropping a little bit is because we've completed the work at ETTP. That's the gray part on top is the funds that was used for that. So. Okay. This is a figure that comes out of the phase construction completion report. With several new members here, I don't know if you've gotten a chance to review that report, but that's a report that we submit each year on the status of the work that's been done at MWOLF. And one of the things that we do there is constantly look at how much waste we expect to have over the several years and how much life capacity we have at MWOLF. And so the bottom part of the gray on this shows how much waste we currently have in there and how much space it's taken up in the landfill. The next color up, which is the yellowish or orange, is there's some clean soil that gets put in there to take up void spaces in there. We haven't had to use any a lot. Now that we have soil cleanup, we use that quite a bit. But so that stays fairly constant. Near the end of the graph there, you see a little bump up, and that's just because we have to use clean soil on top after at the end when we go to close the cell off. And the top part on this graph, what it represents is just some uncertainty that we have in the volume section. On the left at the 22, we know exactly how much waste is there, but as we move to the right, that allows for a little bit of uncertainty in there. But currently we expect that roughly by about 28, fiscal year 28, that the MWOLF should be full, but that With that uncertainty, it could be early 27, or it could also go out into 29. And talking about the two landfills that we're getting ready to start construction on, as I mentioned, landfill 5, we're getting ready to start expansion of 460,000 cubic yards this year. Picture on the right here shows where we did a little bit of prep work there last summer. There's some soil clay that we took up topsoil to get ready for work this year. So that'll be going on as long as we get good dry summer, don't get a lot of rain. We expect to complete that expansion by the end of this year. The next big area which will be expanding is EMDF, which has been the big talk for several years now. MWolf, let me go back. MWolf capacity is 2.3 million cubic yards. EMDF has a planned capacity of 2.2 million cubic yards. So it's very similar in size. It's also in Bear Creek Valley, same place that MWolf is in the show. The big news there, of course, was we finally got the record of decision signed back on September 30th of this past year. And that was the decision on which decision, what remedy to, on what type of landfill to build. Our projection has it currently being complete no later than 2029. We're working to find ways to get that completed sooner, of course. And you'll get on the tour. Anybody goes on the tour next week, we'll be taking you by these locations, so you'll get to see them firsthand. So as we construct a landfill, there's a big system approach to make sure that it's constructed safely and operated safely. So this kind of represents that. And one of the first things we do is want to make sure that we choose the appropriate site to build a landfill. Part of the site, one, we need to make sure that's big enough for the full capacity that we need. As I mentioned, we expect this to be 2.2 million cubic yards to have enough space for all of our cleanup in the future. Another thing that we do is characterization. The site that we chose, we installed 32 piezometers out there to check the water levels of the site. We did a seismic test and make sure that in case of landfill that's stable enough to handle any expected earthquakes in the area. And we also check to see how much clay and soil is available for structural fill and hydraulic filling material. Next thing to ensure that we have a safe landfill, of course, is the design of it. Go through multiple. This landfill in particular, I should say, is a RCRA C. It's going to be designed to RCRA C standards. During construction, the contractor, which for this case will be UCOR, who already operates our existing landfill, they go through a very extensive QA/QC process. DOE has a QA/QC looking over their program, so very thorough in making sure that it's built and constructed according to the design. There's also DOE has a regulatory program that goes through to different forms of performance assessment of the landfill. Before we ever build a landfill, there's something called disposal authorization statement that has to be approved. And then there's another operational disposal authorization statement that has to be approved by DOE, an outside portion outside of our office here before we dispose of any waste. And as mentioned before, the waste acceptance criteria, that's something that determines, what waste can go in each landfill. And then the crews that are demolishing the buildings, they have to do a characterization so they know what waste is going to come over the landfill. And then once it's built, under CERCLA, there's a 5-year CERCLA review that looks at the landfill, and in each year, DOE also under our regulatory agency looks at the process. And then there's monitor wells that are installed. So it's a very extensive process to ensure that it's being operated. So back to EMDF, we started looking at this about 10 years ago that we knew we were going to need the capacity. We started having a lot of meetings back in 2015. During the proposed plan, we did 120 days of public comment periods, took comments. And multiple meetings with the public. I think we had 3 info sessions besides the formal public meeting. Reached out to all the local governments, and then as it drug on a little bit with the process, when we went out with the record decision last year, we also had another public comment period with the public. And then most recently, even though the record of decision got signed, we wanted to continue to provide information to the public. So we had a poster session this past December, which was, I think, well received. And the day we had it, pouring the rain, it wasn't just rain, I would say it's coming down in buckets. So I didn't expect anybody to hardly show up and stuff, but we had nearly 40 members. So that was really good turnout. So that's something that we're going to continue throughout this process, is to have sessions with the public to let you know where we're at in the process, in addition to the SSAB here. So probably this summer, before we start the early side trip, that'll probably be another type of meeting I expect. So what, even though the ROD has been signed now, there's several steps that has to get approved before we start construction even. One of them is the circle process. I talked about the early site prep where we're going to be moving the roads to the south. There's still a regulatory document that TDEC and EPA has to approve to allow that work to start. And we submitted that document to them in December, and that's called an early site preparation remedial design or remedial action work plan. And so currently we've gotten the comments back from TDEC on that, and EPA expects to have their comments back to us February 17th. At that time, we'll review those comments, respond to them, and then provide a second version, which is known as the D2 version of the document. And, we would expect for the FFA that document would be approved within 30 days. That's just to do the road reroutes, to run water and electricity to the site, and also get the construction support area. We're going to create an area where we can put our trailers to work at. So that'll be some first phases that'll be occurring over the next year. And then part of the record of decision, one thing that DOE agreed to do was a groundwater field demonstration. What that is with EMDF is that our models indicate that the water levels will be at a certain level once the landfill is constructed. This was agreement, though, that we did with regulators, but we're going to do this study that goes over 2 years. We're going to go ahead and excavate the site in areas about 20 feet or 5 to 20 feet, different areas, and put a temporary liner at the site. So it will be paved kind of like the liner will once the landfill is constructed, and we're going to use that to verify what our models are showing that the water level is before we ever build the landfill. So that'll be a document that'll be going in a little bit later this year to the regulators for review and official approval before that starts. And then, as you can see on the dates here, a little bit further on, there'll be some additional approval documents that the regulators will review before the landfill is ever constructed. So really, say that even though the record is signed, record of decision is approved, there's still several more approvals throughout this process before the construction is complete on the project. And the top one there, I talked about it was on the other one, but DOE also has an approval process, and that's what that document is the disposal authorizations statements that has to be approved through DOE regulatory process before we ever construct. And kind of give you an idea on the landfill on the right there, there's a blue color. This landfill is going to be constructed in phases. The first phase is the first 2 there, cells 1 and 2, that has a capacity for about 700,000 cubic yards. And then the off to the right is a wastewater treatment system plant that'll be constructed early on. There's some sedimentation ponds that's also in blue. And then the additional capacity is shown in green and the yellowish orange, because that volume that we estimated for this landfill is 2.2 million cubic yards. We have a contingency of 25% built into that. So if down the road we discover that we don't have to have full capacity, then we wouldn't have to build all the landfill. But we definitely don't want to run out of space. Mentioned about the wastewater treatment system, and Elm Walk, where I talked about, we had the contact water ponds and what we sampled before we discharged. One of the difference for EMDF though is that all water, contact water and leachate water before it is discharged, we will do a primary type treatment as a requirement under the ROD. So there won't be just a sample and discharge for some of the water. I think that was it. So open up the questions, or if Roger or Jay wants to add anything. Questions.
Nothing.
Before we open the questions to the members inside the room, I'd like to commend, I believe, if I understand correctly from some of the local media outlets, that your also facility experienced a health emergency with one of your staff members, and the staff member stepped in, saved the man's life from cardiac arrest. So hats off to your staff member that done it. But it shows they're not just changing the environment, they're saving lives for the people that work with them and their staff. So hats off to you. Remember, for the new members, if you have a question, please just take your place card in front of you, please raise it, and we'll call on you one at a time, and then we'll go to the online members. If an online member has a question, please go ahead and raise your hand. And once we get done with the people inside the room here, we'll go to you. So we'll open the floor for any questions, Ms. Smith. Yes, you may.
Have you established your waste acceptance criteria?
No.
Not completely. There are aspects to the waste acceptance criteria that have been finalized. For instance, aspects such as we will not accept any high level waste. We will not accept any spent nuclear fuel, which those aren't that big of an issue because we don't have any of those, but we also will not accept any greater than Class C waste. We will not accept any true waste. We will not accept any listed or we will not accept any listed hazardous waste.
Under RCRA?
Yes, under RCRA, and we will not accept any mercury characteristic waste under RCRA.
What about really?
We are still working on that aspect of the waste acceptance criteria. And that's partly because we're still also getting a handle on where it is at 12%. It's in places that we did not think it might be.
And my other question is on your monitoring discharge water. You explain what the frequency is that
Has not been determined yet. The treatment system will be a flow through treatment, it won't be batch treatment. So we will have to work with our regulators on a sampling analysis plan that will establish the frequency of that sampling. The discharges will meet ambient water quality criteria for non-radiological constituents. Yes. And then for radiological, we're starting to finalize that with EPA TF.
I had a question. You talked about site prep beginning later this year. How about rerouting the Hall Road and all that? When did that start?
That's the main part that'll start later this summer that we expect. Before we can construct the cells, we have to move those roads. That's the main item that'll start. There's about 4,700 feet of Bear Creek Road, which is the paved road that will be relocated. And the Hall Road, that's about 3,700 feet of that'll be moved a little bit more to the south where the current location is.
Will that impact any of the groundwater remediation that will go on at ETTP?
No, part of our requirement is that it not interfere with the transfer. Most of that, any cut-ins that we have to tie into the existing road, the plan is to do that over the weekends where we're normally not hauling. So part of the requirement, even on the Y-12 operations, is though that we don't disturb Y-12 and we do those tie-ins here. So it'll be very minimum impact to any existing.
Thank you.
Any other questions in the gallery? Yes, ma'am, Ms. Butler.
I remember reading past some of the past advocates in the training for this, and I recall a comment from a gentleman, and I don't remember his name, but he said something about how it was important to try to have a 2-year overlap between M. Wolf and the new site, if possible. It almost looks like we're bumping up into 2029 for the end of one and the start of the second. Are we gonna get that overlap?
We're still evaluating possible ways. One of the parts when we're doing our deactivation, demolition of building, the majority of the time is spent with the deactivation. So we are evaluating possibilities on cleanup on that side of doing a little bit more of the deactivation, getting ready for the buildings to demolish and possibly push that forward. Now a little bit is one way that we're looking to have a little bit more of an overlap at the area. That really shouldn't have a big impact on the operation, since the majority of the cleanup the work will be in the deactivation phase. And also looking at ways to push off some of that.
We're also looking at ways of extending the lifespan of the current facility in WMF. Trying to find ways to sort and segregate waste so that we can send more of our waste to the landfills 4 and 5, 7, the permanent landfills. That helps us extend the life of our circle facility. Anything, as Dennis mentioned earlier, anything we can do to increase the amount of recycled or reused material. Again, that also is increasing the amount of characterization that we do. Enables us to do that. It's a trade-off. Characterization costs can be very expensive at times. So we're buying capacity later on by spending a little more money now characterizing. And there's a trade-off there. You have to find that balance, how much you must spend today.
And I will say that's the no later than we're looking at ways to pull that back to the left too. The actual.
One of the reasons for the overlap is our original schedule had us doing certain demolition where we would have very large items that we need to dispose of. And large, I mean, things maybe on the scope of the size of this room. And typically in a landfill, you don't want to put those near the top because over time they're going to start to settle down. What you want to do is you want to have those near the bottom. Well, if you don't have that overlap, you have to then reschedule your work to put those heavy items out in time. And so we've been doing that. We've been looking at other ways of, as Dennis mentioned, rescheduling so that we're doing more pre-demolition work where we're going in and it's basically cleaning buildings out, getting the garbage out. You know, a lot of these buildings, most of these buildings have been around since the 40s and they have accumulated a lot of stuff. And we got to do it right. We have to get all that stuff out first before we then make the building cold and dark and then ready for demolition.
I would add to that, probably an important metric for y'all to keep in your mind as you go out and get the tours, especially for the new members. The majority of the cost and the majority of the hazardous material is in the what we call DEAC or pre-demo work. So that's where your mercury is, that's where your radioactive material is, and that's where the majority of the cost and the hazards are. Once you get the building cleaned out, it's a lot cheaper to knock the building down, and usually the building structure itself is not that contaminated. So that may help you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions?
I have a comment. I'd just like to underscore the fact that MWOOF has been a complete and total success. And, you know, a lot of investment of time and effort over these many years, and the safety aspect of that has been remarkable. And so I'm sure you plan to do the same thing at EMDF. And so I just applaud the effort to this point, because I know it represents a lot of decades.
And lessons learned from that.
Yes.
Thank you for the comment. And to your point, Bonnie, a lot of the lessons learned from operating EMWMF has gone into the design so far for EMDF, including a wastewater treatment system, right? As opposed to trucking it over to Oak Ridge National Laboratory and have it treated in the plan, unless something has changed since I've been away, is when we close EMWMF and you still have the leachate collection system there. Instead of picking that water up and taking it to Roranel, we'll run a pipe down and it'll be treated as well. So.
Yeah, and I appreciate you mentioning, I should have mentioned it, May 20th, last year was 20 years that it was.
Yeah.
Real operation.
Yeah, that's
Wow.
remarkable.
So it is. And it's a little over, I think it's about 208,000 loads of waste that's been disposed of there since operation.
Safely.
Safely.
Ms. Butler, you have no question?
Oh, no.
Ms. Hurd, did you have?
I'm looking for clarification on determining the nature of the clean out material from a building. Is that done by an in-house lab or you have a contractor who looks at something and decides it's dangerous for this reason or for that reason? Do I need to clarify my question?
Well, I tell you what, let me walk through it and then we'll see if that answers your question.
Okay.
So what happens is the crews will go in and it's basically they'll do a site inspection first.
Just eyeball it.
Yeah, to say, like, what do we have in here? And then based on one of the first screening levels we do is process knowledge. We may have enough information about some of the things that are in the building that already know we don't need to sample that. We know that has to go out west. You
We know it's really dangerous.
Yeah, we know, we already know,
Extremes, yeah.
so we don't, a lot of times we may not even bother characterizing it to a great extent. We do have to characterize it some to meet the WAC for the.
For them,
facilities out
tell them what
west.
we're sending them, yeah.
But it's their bar is much lower for what they do. Then after that, we will go through and usually do a radiological survey, walk over with meters, and that will tell you quite a bit there. And then based on what processes we know were used in certain parts of the building, that will inform us to how we need to take samples. And then we will work with our regulatory agency, EPA and TDEC, to come up with a sampling analysis plan that they'll approve that says, we'll take samples here, 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 and here. And then and those samples go to offsite labs, but those labs are certified under DOE. DOE has a program called DOCAP. It's a fairly rigorous process of saying these labs meet certain qualification. And they'll do the analysis, send it back, and based on those, we will make determinations about what we call waste streams. Like this waste here can go to landfill 5. This has to go to EMWMF, or this has to go off-site, or it may be clean. We can reuse it for a different purpose. There's a whole, and that is the super simple description of it. It is a much more involved process than that. Multiple meetings, not just with our regulars, but internally. We have a waste disposal group who I would say has a level of paranoia that is not normal usually. And they are very diligent about how we characterize our waste in their ones.
And there's a reason for that,
Oh,
right?
yes.
Because if you remember a few years ago here, Y12 had shipped something out to NNSS in Nevada for disposal. It had not, for various reasons, had not properly characterized it.
Mhm.
And it shut down
Yeah.
their shipping out there, and that rippled through the whole department.
Yeah.
And actually at Y12, it is still, they are still working their backlog of waste that
I think they
they
made their,
weren't able to send anywhere.
am I right that they made their first shipment since then, a
Mhm.
week or two ago?
Yeah.
So that's how long they were shut down. That happened in what, 18?
Yeah.
2018,
Yeah,
I think.
something like
18 or 19, something
And
like
what
that.
kind of an error was it? They just mischaracterized it or didn't
Yes.
characterize it?
Yeah, it's good, right.
Basic human error somewhere.
So it's important to do both, have historical evidence
Yes.
as well as do the characterization.
And I would say, even internally here, the crews that are doing the characterization before it comes to landfill, there's crews at the landfill that review that they've done to make sure that they can accept it.
Right.
And we're not just taking one side, so there's checks and balances.
Yeah.
Any other questions in the room before we go on? Yes, sir, Doctor.
Just a question on the last slide. It seems that there are several tests that are kind of go, no go for a project. So what would be the risk? I mean, if any of those tests doesn't pass, then you don't keep moving forward.
On the groundwater field demo, I imagine is probably what I'm talking about there, and simply that. Really not a go, no go, it's just they change the design. If we do that demonstration, it shows that the water level is 4 or 5 feet higher than what our models had predicted it was. Then in our design, we would raise the bottom of the landfill up 5 feet to count to ensure that we have that 15 foot of separation between the top of groundwater and the bottom of the lake. So it's really to finalize the design.
Mr. Bartholomew.
The end product that when the end wall is shut down, I guess it'll get capped with that barrier. And then what's the end, I mean, is it field? Or, I mean, that's how to do that. Wood.
It'll be, in perpetuity, be maintained by DOE. The cap is a 13-foot thick, multi-layered cap, has just synthetic liners and clay, rock, grain, intrusion barrier, that kind of thing. Then it'll be capped with soils, and then that will be planted with grass. That will be mowed and if needed, sprayed to keep only thing you want growing up there is grass. You don't want any kind of trees or bushes growing. So those will be maintained that way.
And I would add, since this is a circle landfill under CERCLA, it's required to have 5-year reviews as long as basically that landfill. So as long as it stays there, there'll be continuous reviews going on every 5 years to ensure that it's protected by the CERCLA process. And the MDF is the same way. Once it's officially closed, it'll follow that same process.
In addition to that aspect also is there are things that were put into EMW map that are of classified nature. So the landfill is considered what we call a classified burial ground, has fence around it. And our security folks will never change their mind about that. So there will be security guards who will daily patrol that just for that aspect. They're not going to be out there looking for, their job is not to look for leaks, but if they see something that look off normal, they'll report that also. I guess in some sense, 2 layers of protection there.
Any other questions in the room? We'll go online to Mr. Jones.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can. Go ahead with your question.
Okay, well, got a couple of points here that have to do with the radioactive inventory. And one is, what data did you use to construct the pie chart back about slide 4 or whatever? Do you all know what data was used for that? I've seen that pie chart many times. And I think in a former SSAB meeting where probably neither Dennis or Roger were there, I pointed out that that's probably an optimistic interpretation, because early on in the EMWMF history, there was a lot of pretty highly radioactive kind of medium half-life stuff that should decay. But if you're just looking at radioactivity in terms of curies, there was a lot of stuff put in there for which no inventory was listed because it didn't have a waste acceptance criteria. I'm talking about cesium and strontium. I would just suggest that if you're continuing to use that slide, that you might ought to verify where the data came from, and you might even want to change it in some way so there's not so much uncertainty. Anybody got a comment back on that?
I can address part of that. That pie chart's constructed from data not only for what went into EMW map, but it also includes our inventory of true waste, that total activity. Also activity for material that is still to be disposed, such as our shielded transfer tanks or shielded transfer casks. Numerous items that are still scheduled for disposal off-site, and then also activated materials that are coming out of the old reactors at Orinel. That's all scheduled to go off-site. A lot of the structure from the reactors at Orinel, the one that we just finished, bulk shielding reactor. There were significant quantities of material from that went off-site. The low intensity test reactor, which we are just now getting into, there are parts of that will go off-site. We begin to take it, and then also the clean out of the 3026 hot cells. Significant quantity of material that was left inside of those is going off-site. There's material from the isotope Rho hot cells that is going off-site. So when you start taking into account all of that high activity material, I don't have the data right in front of me, but it does begin to calculate up to where, compared to the curies that went into EMWMF, there's a large number of curies that have gone off-site and are still scheduled to go off-site.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good. So even if you actually have the EMWMF data in there and the curie inventory in it is underestimated, your ballpark numbers may not be so bad because, for example, you're including the true waste and where there's lots and lots of curies in the total inventory. So my other question, and Roger will be familiar, at least probably not Dennis, but at least Roger will be familiar with me asking this question for about 2 decades to various people now. This is something that I thought we would always have a lot of trouble defending was the risk analysis for WAC development at both EMWMF and EMDF. And I'm aware that you all are still in the process of working on that. But I mean, I guess some of you may have been present at public meetings or at DOE regulator meetings where I've brought up the fact that not only were a lot of questions about the technical accuracy of a lot of the calculations, but the risk analysis gives you absurd conclusions when you look at total radionuclide inventory that one would permit in the landfills. And I think that's something that we want to avoid for EMDF. I think just what's in the performance analysis, I can't remember the precise numbers, but it yields the possibility of putting 10% by weight of material of uranium-238 into the landfill. Well, we know we don't even have that much uranium-238. I mean, it's like several percentage of the entire uranium reserves inventory in the world. We know we don't have that, and we know we're not going to put that in. But as you go forward with WAC development, I think I've been harping on this for 20 years now. It's important to not create another target with a absurd WAC like I felt we did at EMWMF. And, the way that we got around that at EMWMF was to negotiate a lower uranium limit and then really just to work on the project teams to limit what we put in there, even if the WAC would let us. So a lot of things went out west that the WAC might have allowed in. That part of that was just because it was going to be so hard to characterize it. But some of it was just goodwill on everybody's part. We don't want to look stupid here. We got a crazy whack. Let's, let's not push it to its limit. So that's more of a comment, but a question. But where are you then, from a question point of view, on working on WAC?
We will begin what we're calling a supplement. We have agreed with the state and EPA to conduct a supplemental analysis, which is basically it's fundamentally going through DOE's protectiveness process again, but using different assumptions. And we will then, based on the outcome of that, have further discussions with EPA and TDEC about what the WAC, where we can come down in agreement on what the WAC will be. We haven't started those meetings yet. We're still working. Right now, our focus is on early site prep.
Yeah, I understand. It would be good to keep in mind, since there has been such a systematic long-term failure here, that you might want to look to some other places for answers than the answers that you have gotten from the various contractors over the last 2 decades. I mean, I don't think DOE really has the expertise to look into the modeling and pick out the issues there, but you can look at the conclusions and see if they make any sense. Is this inventory limit that you're saying you could get from this WAC? Does it look like a high level disposal facility when you look at total inventory? And in fact, DMWMF did for cesium and strontium. We didn't put that much in, of course, but that's all I've got.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Thank you, Mr. Jones, for your comments and questions. Let's open the floor for anyone else on the web. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. Any more questions in the room? Ms. Shelley, do you have a public comment here?
We do have one public comment that was previously submitted by a member of the public. It concerns EPDF and the surrounding area. It is too long for verbatim discussion, but you will find it in your packet, and it will also be preserved as part of the meeting record.
Thank you, Ms. Shelley. Thank you for your presentation, both of you, Mr. Petrie. Ms. Shelley, you have any comments on topics concerning the board?
Not at this time. I've noted that Michael Sharp, our EM Stewardship Committee Chair, has said he did not have anything to report.
So this concludes the presentation portion. You're welcome and free to leave. Thank you again for your attendance. We'll go straight into the board business meeting. In your packets, you should have received 2 different. Do we have a motion on the floor by one of the members to approve the agenda? Motion on the floor. Do we have a second? All those in favor, raise your hand, please. Regarding rules, we'll go straight to the board business with a review and a possible motion on the floor to approve the minutes from first the October 12th, 2022 meeting. Are there any comments, questions, amendments, or do we entertain a motion to approve or deny? Have a motion on the floor to approve. Do we have a second? Motion second. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed, like sign. We'll go straight to the minutes of the November the 9th, 2022 minutes. Again, had time to review that. Any additions, changes, questions, or a motion to approve or deny?
Approve.
Have a motion to approve. Do we have a second? Motion second. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, like sign. Sorry about some I say aye and some I say hands. I'm not used to having to raise your hands. You do raise your hand. I'm not used to the deal anyway. Response to the recommendations, Ms. Noy, will take over.
Certainly don't have any open recommendations. I wanted to point out
For the new members, if you look at the beginning part of the agenda, we have the issue group for this EMDF presentation. If anybody in the room or online wants to get added to the issue group, just send an email to Shelley and Sarah, and they can add you to this group so that you can start participating at that EM stewardship meeting, which will happen February 22nd. I'm going to also let the members know we just got our new members on, which is wonderful. But we're beginning recruitment for the next section. So, it takes over a year to get that through. So if anybody has any members that they think they would like to, that would like to participate, let us know. We will get them applications. So keep that in mind over the next few months. Also want to let you know that while we have our board meetings, we are part of a larger chair. That larger chair will be having an EM chairs meeting in March. So we will then be hosting the next EM chairs meeting in the fall. So we're looking at a potential time frame. We thought we'd nail down something in September, but we've been told now that won't work. So we're looking to confirm that date, but we will be hosting in fall. So many of you who've not had an opportunity to go to an EM chairs meeting at another location, you'll be able to attend locally and see what it's all about. And that kind of helps prepare you when you move forward. And that's all the comments back.
Thank you, Lloyd. No presentations from the EM. In closing remarks, I'd like to thank everyone for volunteering your time. Welcome the new members to the board. Like I said before, I encourage you to please participate, learn as much as you can, and walk away with the same feeling that Shell and I have as far as all we've learned and participation. So anything else come for the board? If not, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Have a motion on the floor to a second. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed, like sign. If you will, for the members, please come up here. Ms. Shelley would like to take a group photo, so we have several here.